I remember when I was a kid and I was watching the first moon landing when they first stepped out and stuff, and they said the eagle had landed. That's the way I felt when we did our first transplant.
It was kind of like hitting a grand slam in the ninth inning and winning the World Series, because it just went so well.
I think it was an exciting time. It was something very different, and it has made an enormous impact on a number of people's lives.
I have here my calendar for 1984. And on February 13th of 1984, that happened to be a Monday, at 3 o'clock, I had a meeting concerning the heart transplant program. We formed a team of individuals that met over that year period, representatives from all of the disciplines that would come into play in a heart transplant.
And about a year before we did the first transplant, I was walking down the hall and Rosemary stopped me and said, "My husband's going to be the first heart transplant that we do." And I looked at her and said, "Rosemary, we're not planning on doing heart transplants right now." And she said, "I know, but we're going to be doing that, and Sam's going to be the first transplant." And lo and behold, she was right. Sam was the first transplant.
His dear wife, Rosemary, who worked in radiology, had referred him to my practice. And I remembered several things about Sam. I know he'd had his heart attack in '75, his bypass in '81, and things weren't going particularly well for his heart muscle by '85. And Sam was 50 years of age, and I remember the discussions we used to have. "Do you think I'm too old, Chris?" And the other thing, I remembered how much he wanted to live. He was not ready to give up on life.
It was like being on a championship, if you ever play organized sport on some type of championship team. Everybody knew their position, everything. I mean, you knew what you're supposed to do. You knew what place you're supposed to be in. We had practiced this over and over again.
We did dry runs in the operating room to make sure we had everything ready. We worked really hard to make sure that everything would go perfect.
And we did do some planning about what we might need in addition to drugs that were normally used. And so we spent time with that, with Nancy and the group, looking for things that we might need to add for that evening.
The actual day of the transplant, my wife and I were at a picnic that afternoon. Nancy Long called and said, "We're going to do a heart transplant this evening." My wife and I weren't in the operating room. We were in my office waiting for the good news concerning the heart transplant. We actually went to the cafeteria and made sandwiches for the heart transplant team to have after the conclusion of the procedure.
I remember how people felt, that first anticipation. It's got to go well.
And we flew the donor into St. Luke's, and they were in the operating room next to Sam. And so we had two whole teams there, one who was preparing for the excitement of giving Sam his new heart, and the other team who was honoring the life of this donor and the gift that they were about to give.
And I remember Dr. Killen removed the donor heart, and at the time I remember it was a young motorcycle victim. It was brought over into the room where Sam lay, and there was no heart in his chest. And I still can see that in my head, what a contrast that was to what I'd ever thought about the human body. And I tell you, Dr. Reed, he was such a demanding presence. You just knew things were going to go well. He was calm. It went through, I don't remember any any upsetness in the room. It just went really smooth.
Yeah, I mean, everything, you can feel the excitement, you can feel the tension. Everyone knew we were going through something special, and it was,
The surgery was, as they always say, uneventful, and he did fine. And I think went home in about 18 days.
I remember sterilizing newspaper. He got all his news a day late because I got the Star paper, sterilized the day, and then we give it to Sam the next day so he can read.
One of the important things that have come about over the years is the advent of cyclosporin and how it's helped with the rejection, and that the fact that we started out with few drugs, but now we have many drugs available to us to help fight the rejection.
Our transplant program has stood the test of time. We've been doing heart transplants for 30 years, some 666 heart transplants or more, and with a survival rate that is as good as any place in the country.
It's truly one of the hallmarks of my career, of being able to be there present in the operating room that night, and I'm very thankful I had that experience.
It was a time of us really engaging as a team in the ICU to do everything right to make sure that this gift, and we all understood that this was a gift, that this patient had a second chance when somebody else, unfortunately wasn't going to get that. And I think it was a fabulous time for us to really do something that felt like it was really making a difference.
There are patients who want to live and patients who don't want to die, and they do amazingly different. Patients who want to live tend to be very successful, and no matter what happens after transplant, they make the most of it and enjoy every day. And Sam was truly one of those patients. He had a small grandson that he enjoyed every day of his life.
Interestingly, 3 months ago, approximately 3 months ago, my neighbor here in Kansas City, across the street from me, had a heart transplant, number 650, I think. And this really impacted me to think that 30 years later, I know the patient across the street who had a heart transplant, and he's walking around, he's jogging, he's walking the dog with me, stuff like that. It gives me chills to think about that. And tears. That's okay.